Alright, new year, new game review video. So today we're going to be talking about a little video game called Eradicator. So what is Eradicator and why haven't most people heard of it? Well, mainly because it's one of the many FPS games that came out during the 90s, or Doom clones as they were known back then. And we're essentially buried in the myriad of other games trying to emulate Doom's success to mixed results. Now, I'd come across this game as of December of last year and basically been sitting on the footage for it. Anyways, so it was released by Accolade at the end of December of 95. I'd never even heard of this company at the time. Though I should note there is some confusion as to the actual release date of the game. When I was doing research over the course of gathering the gameplay footage for this video, according to Wikipedia, this puts it at October 26th, whereas the Steam and GOG version puts us at January 1st of 96 and December 31st of 95. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that's probably closer to one of these than Wikipedia. And I'm going to be using the GOG date going forward. Not that it's really going to matter. Anyways, either way, this game had the misfortune of coming out the same year as Duke Nukem 3D, which was vastly more popular, and well, look at it. You got Duke fucking Nukem, before he became lame, beating the piss out of alien bastards and spouting awesome one-liners. And then you have Eradicator, which I now believe, looking back and playing through to it, being a far superior gaming experience. And I want to explain why. First things first, we are going to go over a little backstory covered in the intro, so minor spoilers ahead. No timestamp, folks. The game opens up with an alert broadcast from the United Miners Guild. The Citadel, a massive fortress, having been reactivated on a world that had a very vital resource. And the moon's having some kind of energy shield around him. Essentially, this prick right here, Gore, has essentially put a stop to whatever mining operations are on these moons. I don't know much about the material, save for the fact that it's the only source for them, and kills pretty much everyone in the operation. Afterwards, you select one of 3 characters, technically 4, but we'll get into that later. This big burly lizard bastard who can tank and dish it out, but is slower than molasses. An Otaku Wet Dream who relies on sheer speed and maneuverability to get the job done, but can't take a hit. And then there's old Crazy Dave here, that's faster than the Lizard Dude and more durable than Wet Dream. Basically your 3 archetypes: Mighty Glacier, Lightning Bruiser, and Master of None. This isn't something I usually see at all for 90s FPSs, save for maybe the original Doom Alpha. Anyways, I know these aren't their actual names, but we need some shitty jokes here and there to liven things up. Essentially, each character has their own playstyle and requires different approaches to each level. And again, as stated, it's not something I've usually seen done in other 90s FPSs, and believe me, there's a lot of them out there. Each character usually has their own starting mission, but will follow a mission path going forward. The game has a total of 25 levels, all interconnected a la Doom 2 style rather than the episodic gaming that was typical of the era. Now, as always with these sorts of videos, we'll be doing the usual breakdown of the formula. Gameplay, this includes movement, gunplay, and level design, sound design, and then finally graphics. Yes, I hold graphics as the least of these because there's far too many idiots that say graphics are the only thing that make or break a game. No, Captain Dipshit, they in fact do not make the game. But for the sake of my sanity, I'm going to back away from this topic and get back to the one at hand. For getting my feet wet with the first playthrough of this game, I went with the Master of None and just dived right in. This doesn't mean I didn't play the other characters, but I've always felt that sometimes going with the journalist is the best way to play when first starting out with a game like this. Now, how's the gameplay? Well, movement, doesn't matter what character you use, is smooth as butter. Controls are extremely responsive, but not to the point you feel like you're slipping on ice. Most of the time. Though, I had to do a little remapping for the more modern WASD configuration. Hey, don't get me wrong, I love these old games, but the old school arrow key layout just don't do it for me anymore. Not unless the control scheme would be completely screwed up as a result. Fucking Star Siege. Now, there is one other mechanic that does factor into this. Camera controls. You can switch between first and third person because some levels require platforming, and while that's really unusual and generally not something you want to do in an FPS, the fact you can switch between the two makes this extraordinarily easier. Just that much easier. Anyways, we're back on top of it. Movement's good, which is always a plus. Gunplay's pretty solid too, though I should mention that it does have a couple of unusual takes for the era. You get 15 different weapons, with each having its own purpose. Some of these are your generic pistol, shotgun, chain gun spiel leading to your classic power-ups, while some, including the classic missile launcher, are remote controlled. Yeah, you heard me. Remote controlled weapons in the 90s. RCXD, anyone? And while some would argue that these are nothing more than some stupid gimmick, I assure you, friend, they are not. And they offer some, shall we say, interesting tactical opportunities. Though I will admit, I didn't take advantage of these as much as I should have. The second of these is the fact you start with all your weapons. You just need to find the ammo. I have never seen this done in any other 90s FPS. In fact, the only game I have ever seen this done in is the Cube series, which is a game that will get its own review in due time. Also, typical of a lot of latter-day 90s games FPS is the inclusion of an inventory system, with all kinds of weird and wacky power-ups, from anti-gravity boosts that basically act like Blood's jump boosts, to a deployable auto turret which shoots everything in front of it, to even the soul capture. I wasn't sure what this thing did until I was low on health and decided to try it out. Stand next to an enemy corpse, and guess what? You heal off them when you activate it. That's pretty hardcore. Each character also has some minor variation in weapons. For example, Crazy Dave here has for his grenade-type weapon something that acts like the primary fire of the 8-ball gun from Unreal, whereas Wet Dream has one that fires a single big projectile, and all three of them have their own version of their starting weapon. Another thing I will say is that, save for a few situations in the late game, all weapons actually remain useful. Hell, even the pistol can be used to deal with the vast majority of low and even some mid-tier enemies if you're low on ammo for the other weapons. Though a lot of the other weapons are also meant to be used in specific situations. It's not all fun and games, though. Apparently, your power-ups can break while active if you take damage. I had that happen to me during a boss fight. Which brings us to the topic of enemies. Enemies, whether bosses or grunts, come in two varieties: ground powders and flyers. And both are equally dangerous, with the grounders being able to take a beating and dish it out, and the flyers able to come at you from odd angles. Almost every enemy has some form of ranged and melee attack, using guns to keep the pressure while seeking to close the distance. Now, there are exceptions, such as these little floating things that come at you like a lost soul and explode. And they tend to either be hard to see or lurk in odd places, and they take a chunk out of your health when they go boom. Thank you so much, Accolade, because enemies like this need to be even more deadly. Kinda makes you glad that for all the aggravation they cause, the sentry bots in Duke 3D are at least easy to hit. Rousing aside, the fact that a quarter of your enemies can fly and are therefore quite mobile leads to many encounters being extremely squirrely. Especially later on when they can either fire rockets or use a flamethrower, and I will say this, all enemy attacks are projectile based. No hit scan hell here. Now, there are a few enemies that break this mold, such as turrets and these Gyarados looking motherfuckers that pop out of liquid. It does add an extra threat vector and has a lot of it basically makes a lot of enemy variety. I will say enemy detection is a bit wonky. It seems to be primarily vision based or triggering a specific event, so if you get the drop on them, you can usually weed them out. But I've also had this backfire, so you need to exercise caution. I will say boss fights aren't great. The first one was cool, the fight with Gore was alright, but the main enemies themselves are where it's at. Still, minor gripes aside, the fighting's good. Level design is, with a few exceptions, actually pretty damn good. Each level has a set of objectives that need complete before you can exit, with the layouts having just enough variation to allow for free exploration, without derailing you to the point it's time-consuming or preventing you from accomplishing your objectives in short order, because you're going in circles, unless you get confused. Although I will say that when it comes to these levels, a lot of the confusion is related to a lack of awareness and actual bad level design. A good example of this would be on the third mission. You have to disable 3 force fields by destroying all 3 of their power generators by unlocking their gates via security stations. After knocking them out, getting back to the elevator before they're repaired. And no, you can't destroy the repair droids sent out. I tried. Here's the thing. I was able to destroy them, but what I didn't realize until I'd gone and looked it up, and we all know how much I just love doing that the generator's number was plastered clean as day on the walls. 1, 2, and 3. This wasn't the first level I had this happen on, but you need to actually pay attention to the environment. And because that lack of awareness can throw you off. Other missions had you using cameras much like Duke 3D to scope out an area, as well as taking advantage of using the pilot control systems to complete objectives, such as using enemies to bypass security as a form of drone, perform recon, hit switches, or use them as guided weapons to destroy objectives to advance the level. It's definitely an interesting take, and the only time I've ever seen this done for any period of time in the 90s era was the first level of Shadow Warrior, where you had to control an RC car to get a key that was, for the time, a pretty cool mechanic. On a side note, enemies don't end fight, so you can use them to take the piss out of whatever sap you come across. I think the only really aggravating part of the level design was, aside from occasionally getting confused, was the platforming. As stated, these do not belong in a 90s FPS. but the fact that you can switch between first and third person mode does make this considerably easier, so make of that what you will. Now, in the tradition of 90s FPS games, secret areas abound. This includes levels. However, it's not as simple as, say, Doom 2, find the secret exit in a level, hit the switch, and then go to X level. In order to get to the secret levels, you gotta find keycards scattered throughout the normal ones, and you gotta find a certain amount of them. Not enough keycards? Sorry pal, no dice, you ain't going. I think I only ever unlocked one, but for you completionists out there, it's another goal to work towards. Sound design, well, overall it's a bit hit and miss. When it comes to the weapons, they sound pretty good, with a few exceptions. A combination of chunky thunks, powerful sounding explosions, and cybernetic whirring. Enemies, while they do have some variation, particularly when they're moving, you can either hear them rolling on treads or hear them hovering. They don't have a lot of variation when it comes to alert sounds. Outside of a few exceptions, you're not going to know if you're up against a regular grunt or some powerful mini-boss. Though, again, there are exceptions. It's nice to know when a turret goes off. The characters' voice lines are also a bit hit and miss, but it's not as bad as Star Siege's human actors. I know. Not a high bar to set, but I do feel they need a little something extra. The music is this eerie-ass ambience that plays throughout the entire game. It's this combination of vocals, sound effects, and instrumentals that have been composed in such a way that it causes the hairs on the back of your neck to stand up on end. Here, take a listen. Normally, I'd say that having a single track for your entire game is a major weakness, but given the fact that this game has an almost horror-esque theme, given that you're crawling around a base with all kinds of body horror enemies, I think it actually fits pretty well. Now, for graphics, these are definitely MS-DOS era graphics, so there's a bit of crispiness to them, though despite their age, they still look nice. The enemies themselves look almost like a combination of 40K meets Mutant Chronicles, amalgamations of Flesh and Steel. And they actually look pretty good, despite their age. The animations are nice. You can generally tell when they're going to attack, which gives you a chance to get out of the way, to death animations, which are suitably gory and turn enemies into gibs if you hit them hard enough. Even the base, despite being a bit on the generic side in terms of textures, still has a certain something thanks to its atmosphere. You're going down hushed, darkened corridors, waiting for some security system to go off, or get attacked by some lab-grown nightmare where you only have seconds to react before you're torn to shreds. All in all, it's pretty good. Even the characters, despite you only ever seeing their rear, look nice. So yeah, good on you, Accolade. Nice graphics. Now, some last minute notes before the video's conclusion. The game does in fact have multiplayer, but it's either modem or serial, so unless you have someone to play LAN with, I wouldn't bother. Also, that fourth character I mentioned, a generic Space Marine, starts off in the base. Doesn't seem to have any voice lines, but does use the grunts of the Master of None. He's unlocked after being the main game, though I did have it crash afterwards. So, what's my conclusion? Eradicator is one of those rare gems in an era where everyone and their mother was trying to cash in on Doom's success. And while yes, it does just that, it does it in such a way that it manages to carve out its own identity in the process. Looking at all these mechanics coming together in such a way that aside from a few minor hiccups, it is a fun, well-made, and well-thought-out ride. And I do highly recommend it. You can pick it up on GOG or Steam for about $6, and I genuinely think this is one of those games that needs the Kex engine treatment. But feel free to disagree. Anyways, I've been Farzy the Salty VTuber, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace out. Well, that was quite the ride, wasn't it? Anyway, if you stuck around this long, I do appreciate it. I mean, I really do. Content like this would not be possible without viewers like you, so I want to say thank you for that. Anyways, I've been sitting on this footage, I want to say, since, it would have been since December, early January. I'd already done up all the voice work, I had it ready to go, and my plan was to get it edited by the end of the month. Well, that didn't happen. I think I worked on it off and on, and just now got around to finishing it. And I think a big part of it was just burnout, because I think I cranked out like 3 or 4 videos in the span of like 2 weeks. And while that may not seem that impressive, because there's people who crank out videos every single day, given the sheer amount of editing I've got to do and the fact that I work a full-time job on top of it, I think it's pretty damn impressive. Anyways, this is going to mark a return to form. While I'm not going to be pushing videos out like these every single month, I am going to try and at least go for every other month. Obviously, we have the Diablo Unique Item series. We have a gameplay mechanic video where I'm going to be talking about a few things. And basically, the gameplay mechanic videos are where we're going to discuss the various, well, game mechanics of the games I review and everything else. Anyways, if you guys want to swing by the Discord, there's a link in the description below. Or you can catch me over on X. I stream, used to be every Thursday evening, but here recently it's going to be every Friday evening and Saturday morning, unless something comes up. Or, you know, I have to get a video like this done. Anywho, if neither of those interest you, well, hit the like and subscribe button. Helps the channel out, and I will see you all next time. Peace out.